Hi, thank you for joining SUSECON Digital 2022. So for this technical talk TU21204, I would like to share with you regarding how to manage a SAP landscape throughout the monitoring and validation which you're going to utilize on the SUSE solutioning. So this will be the agenda for today. So I'm going to go for a brief overview in terms of the SUSE SAP infrastructure stack. Then we're going to talk about how to integrate it with validation tool, which is we're going to use our SUSE Trento. Then even that with monitoring tool where we're going to utilize Prometheus and Grafana later on. So before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Shamsul Zulkifli. I'm a solution architect based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. So I'm more focused in terms of the SAP kind of ecology or ecosystem, and also the latest one, which is the SUSE Rancher, which is our container and application delivery management tool. Okay, so before that, let me share with you our three major pillar that built in terms of the SUSE solutioning. So the first one will be always be on the business critical, which is our Linux operating system. So this one you might familiar with it. What SUSE can build it from. So we help you to reduce the complexity of managing any hybrid infrastructure. Either it's on-prem or it's a virtual infrastructure, or it could be on the public cloud environment. So we also help you to harden and secure all mission critical workload. And the next one what you wanted to achieve is to help to eliminate downtime. Okay, so that is our core business. Then the next one we start move after the acquire of the SUSE Rancher, we go into the enterprise container management. So this one we going to help the partner or the customer how they can reduce the complexity using a container, maybe Docker, or they start to use a Kubernetes throughout our SUSE Rancher solutioning. Then also have this is also one of the key point for you to start modernize the application from the monolithic kind of infrastructure into a microservices environment. So with all this consolidation, we hope it will help you to reduce costs, and also it's going to help you to reduce risk by managing your mission critical workload. And last and not least is more for to edge environment where to accelerate business innovation. So you help you to deploy at scale, meaning that you can have a consistency deployment either when you run it on the container or not, sorry, when you run it on the centralized data center, or maybe on the cloud, or it could be on the edge environment. So this one will need to coexist with the hardened security, hardened compliance, and also some of the most important one is the privacy. So that is what our major pillar in terms of SUSE solutioning. Okay, let's go for the SUSE SAP infrastructure stack in terms of this managing SAP landscape. So from the first one, what you need to have the operating system itself, which is our slash for SAP. So with this slash for SAP, it will come in built with the high availability, which is going to have a which you're going to need to cater for all your mission critical workload. So you need to have a failover node for you to in case for any downtime or any unexpected downtime that is happening. Then on top of this, you can also add in additional live patching. So this one will make the admin life easier because you can always patch the system without need to have an immediate system reboot. So you can plan for your patching, but you still doesn't have to apply for any downtime during that activity. So that is the first and our first stack in terms of this SUSE Landscape monitoring and also validation, the operating system itself. Then the next one is the SUSE Trento. So this is our high availability validation and tuning. And the third one will be on the monitoring itself. So this one we utilize Grafana and Prometheus to collect the metric where we send it to Prometheus. Then we're going to display as a very nice UI using the Grafana dashboard. And we're going to utilize SUSE Rancher to use all this kind of monitoring tool. So that is some of the integration that I'm hoping you can consider to implement in terms of managing your SAP landscape. Okay, as we know that SUSE Linux Enterprise Server for SAP application has been endorsed as the SAP Endorsed App certification. So because with the benefit from this operating system, such as the zero downtime with /HA, then come with live patching, fast innovation and reduce risk from outage, and also is the hybrid infrastructure support, which is it could be in any platform. So that's why we even SAP always recommend to use slash for SAP to host for you any critical SAP workload. Okay, so that is the operating system itself. The next one will be the high availability. So in terms of high availability for Linux, you already familiar. It's built on top of the core racing and pacemaker, which are our Linux HA capability. Part of that command line where you can manage your HA, you can also use the what we call it web UI or web browser UI to configure your HA. We call it hot web UI, where you can configure your resource of your cluster easily through the GUI. So it doesn't need to have remember all the command. You just open up the web browser, go for the hot web UI, then you can start configure your HA from that website. And the third one is our some enhancement in on top of this, where we have a YAS wizard for SAP and HA capability. So the first one is the SUSE HA, where you can configure your SAP, mostly SAP HANA kind of workload, integrate with the HA through a wizard. So you might not need to know all the command that you need to configure the SAP, like the SAP replication method, the HA configuration parameter. You doesn't need to connect. You just launch the wizard, and it help you to uh, deploy and configure the HA and the SAP workload for you right out of the box. So that is one of the thing. The next best thing is the one that I recommend you for you to use is the SAP HANA cluster update. So this one is after you configure your SAP workload with high availability, but in the near future that you wanted to upgrade to the latest version of OS, or it could be latest version of SAP release, you can just use the HANA update to do all this kind of stuff. So it's a wizard. It will take over and let you to migrate or to update your workload and safely, I can say. It will do all the it will do all the backend operation, like put the cluster into maintenance, ask you to update the HANA release, or if possible it update the operating system version also. Then it will do the failover, then the final product, then everything will be updated in your environment with a minimum downtime that is required, which is only required during the failover. So that is what I like about the SUSE as HANA update wizard. Then when I talk about HA previously, you can say, oh, there's a lot of scenario in terms of HA. When I talk about SAP HANA HA only, they have at least minimum four kind of scenario. We have a SUSE performance optimized, we have the cost optimized, then we also have multi-target, or it could be for scale out. That just for the SAP HANA only. Then if you start to go for NetWeaver, then there's a lot more scenario that you can implement. So with all the scenario that you configure, who that able to validate your configuration? Is it follow the best practice? Is it follow the correct parameter, tuning parameter, etc. from what I've been told in the SUSE documentation? So this one, that's why the next best thing is coming, which is the SUSE Trento. So what is actually a SUSE Trento? It's actually for high availability checking and validation tool, where it will help you to validate your HA configuration. A part of that, I can say, is also able to manage your SAP ecosystem. If you doesn't have installed like HANA Cockpit, or maybe you doesn't have like HANA Studio, you can use this simple SUSE Trento to check your HANA services, to check your system replication services throughout this web browser also. So web UI also. So this one will help you to validate and manage your SAP ecosystem. So this is the simple architecture scenario. What does you need? So other than your SAP workload, which is running slash for SAP, you just have to deploy another. It could be a VM to run a Trento, which is running on top of K3S, which is our lightweight Kubernetes services. Or even if you have a Kubernetes environment in your ecosystem, you can just deploy it through the Helm chart. Okay, so Then in the slash for SAP perspective, you just have to enable the Trento agent to connect to your Trento server. Then it will start to communicate and give you all the information that needed. This is some of the example. What are the information that will be displayed in the Trento web server? So by right, the first one in here is mostly the SAP ecosystem. So the HANA services. Then if you have a replication services, it will also show you the replication status, the SID, the instant ID. Everything will be displayed here. Then the most thing that I can say that help you to manage your SAP Landscape is the HA validation. So in here, you can see there's a red mark here, which a lot of some that need to be pre-tuned. So when you just click in this check in this tab, then you can see what are the things that you need to change to make sure is follow the SUSE best practice in managing your SAP workload. Maybe you need to change some SBD timeout. Maybe you need to change some corresponding parameter. So that is what will be displayed here. Then you just follow the solutioning and apply to follow the best practice that are from the SUSE itself. So that is why Trento help you to validate and check your high ability and also help you to manage your SAP ecosystem. Okay, so you start to validate the infrastructure. Now you wonder, so you have a best SAP landscape running, you have the HA running, you have the live patching running, you even have a validation tool running. Now you want to sub monitor your SAP landscape. You have like HANA in 3 different sites. So you want to monitor the resource. So this is where we come with the SUSE monitoring and agent. This is come by default with the slash for SAP application. The agent is already been listed there. You just have to enable it. So what you need to have, like you might have a centralized monitoring server which is running Prometheus. You can always send the metric to that Prometheus server, or maybe you can build the new one if you doesn't have. So what is actually the metric that can be sent to that Prometheus server? You can export like the node exporter. So this is more on to collect the information in terms of the operating system. Then you have a cluster exporter, which is to monitor and manage your to monitor your HA status. Then you also have a HANA DB. So this one to monitor the SAP HANA database for your environment. So in here, if you can see for this image, I have create like 3 kind of metric. One is for the HANA cluster to monitor my cluster. The second one is the HANA database. So it's on the active passive failover. That's why one database is not being connected. It's not up. It's only connected to a single database at one time. Then the third one will be the node itself, the SAP HANA node itself. So this one I want to monitor the resource like CPU, memory, disk, file system, use availability, and etc. Everything can be managed here. So you just have to send the metric to that Prometheus server. So after you have sent the metric, so what is the next step to integrate it? So in here, I'm going to use the SUSE Rancher as the monitoring tool because SUSE Rancher is actually have a monitoring tool built-in predefined. It's using the Prometheus and Grafana. So as you can see here, you just have to deploy this monitoring tool. It's by right have a own Prometheus and Grafana running because the Prometheus here to manage all the container. So apart of you just managing your SAP node environment, you also can start to modernize your application and monitor your container application. So this one we can use we can say it's a two-in-one kind of infrastructure. We can monitor the traditional application, traditional node. We can also start to monitor the modernized application and also like container nodes. So how does this integrate each other? Okay, let's start from the first. The first one, you're going to have the um, SAP environment itself, which is you running the slash for SAP as the OS. You install SAP HANA, then you install HA and live patching. After everything is ready, you will integrate it with the Trento, where it will validate the HA. It also will going to manage your some of the SAP ecosystem. Then apart of that, you want to start monitor, you can send the metric. So when you have a slash for SAP, you can just enable them. You can export the metric into any Prometheus server. Then if you have your own centralized monitoring, you can just you can just push it to that centralized monitoring, which is running Prometheus or Grafana. In here, in my current setup, I only do it for the uh, Prometheus setup. I can only do it for the current environment. Then in here, I'm going to use a SUSE Rancher as a monitoring tool. In here, you can see here, I create a dedicated Kubernetes environment to only work as a monitoring server. So this one, by right after I deploy, it will have a Prometheus and Grafana being installed. This is one of the concept that I'm use the integration between the traditional kind of application and also with the modernized kind of application. So how does it been done? Okay. So how does it been done? In here is a very straightforward. When you already send the metric into the Prometheus, you just have to add the target Prometheus into your Grafana dashboard, which is running on Rancher. So you just create a dedicated, like maybe SAP Prometheus, where you can add on later on into the Rancher monitoring tool. So later on, when you create a new dashboard, you can just refer to that Prometheus. Then you will have a dedicated uh, dashboard just for your SAP environment. So that is very quite, and I can say it's a very easy step that you can do it to start managing your infrastructure. So this one is just adding a data source into a Rancher monitoring. So this will be the end result. When you have the adding the data source into the Rancher monitoring, you can start to use the Grafana dashboard. SUSE also already create a template for the Grafana dashboard, which you can use it later. Either it's for the node, either it's for the cluster, or either for the HANA database. So you doesn't have to create the dashboard from scratch. Your example from the last one is a node one I already utilize. So you can monitor your CPU, memory, disk, resource, and etc. It's very detailed, even file system layer, file system buffer, you can just check from there. Then the second one is on the cluster layer. So in them on the cluster layer, you can monitor your cluster. Either you have a quorum, either you have a SBD issue, if your SBD is properly working or not. So that is from the cluster layer. Then on the last one will be on the database layer. So this one you can monitor your SAP HANA. How is the CPU, how the memory, how the file system, how many usable capability that you can use for HANA, how the system replication status, everything can be monitored from here. So that is the end result that we are targeting into managing your SAP landscape. Not just from the SAP as a standalone, you can start growing one by one, step by step, from SAP into HA, then live patch, then you start to validate with Trento. Then after everything is working, you can just add on with the SAP monitoring, where you can use it later on to monitor all your SAP environment. So that's all what I can say for now. I hope you have a great information from this session, and then you can start evaluate how you can to manage your SAP landscape into a greater height, rather than just a standalone SAP. Now you can have like validation, you can have everything all in one place. So hopefully this session will help you into join that kind of what we call it decision, in terms of how you start to change a bit away how you're going to manage your SAP environment. Okay, thank you so much, and bye bye.